The other thing I did, besides sort the entire dashboard out, was I finally got this temperature gauge to work. I've also actually wired it up through a better fuse now as well, so it's now for a kit car mod type fuse box, which uses the common spade ones, whereas it was in a little inline one, so that's a bit better. The only thing is, I have also managed to make it work properly now with a bit of an unconventional approach. I'll show you that in a minute. But the only thing it has proved, however, is actually I need to have a better look at the radiator and cooling system on the car, because as you can see, it's currently sitting a little bit high when we sit in idle. I did drive it earlier on and we were literally doing about 60 miles an hour with it sitting at about 95-degree mark according to this gauge. I thought that ain't so good, and then came back home and realised actually the lid on the expansion tank was a little bit loose, so I tightened it up. I've just been for a good drive, and that's improved matters. It was sitting sort of the high 80s, but now I've stopped again, it's gone back up again. Now I think I know what the actual problem here is, so I will show you that very, very soon. So what I've done is, originally I had the sensor in the back of the head over there where it's supposed to go, with a little adapter, because it's a special 1.8 MPT sensor to go with the aftermarket kit. But over there in that plate, I never got it to work properly at all. It either read massively or not at all. What I managed to do in the end was find a electrical fitting like this that enabled me to put, that enabled me to make use of this pipe that I've acquired by bypassing the carburetor circuit, as I did beforehand, to improve the fuel vapour issues. What I've done is I've put this straight fitting in here that has the right hole and thread size for the sensor to use, and then I've earthed it by basically putting this terminal on here and then putting it up to the carburetor. I've then had to extend the wire that I had going over to there, over here, to obviously make the sensor itself attach up to the gauge. It's not final, it's just been testing so far, so it's quite a little bit messy. Anyway, what this has sort of actually suddenly started to prove is that I need to improve the cooling on the car, because as I showed you beforehand, the temperature is sitting a little bit high. It should be about 85 when it's sitting there idling, and with the fan it should be a continuous 85 degrees. Obviously if it was an electric fan, it would get to say 89 degrees, cut in, cut back out at say 85. So running the fan should maintain at 85 degrees. Now I think I already know what the issue is here. Basically, the original radiator has a shroud around the blades of the fan, and that then goes up to the radiator itself. It basically means that when that's spinning, the shroud is forcing it to only suck air from the radiator itself, whereas at the moment without one, it can essentially suck anything in front of it. Now the trouble is, obviously you may all remember on Instagram, but I'll explain to you again now. I had issues with the original radiator a couple of years ago, and the only way to solve it in the end was to fix this spare radiator cable, because that's actually out of Mark 1.5. Now fitted because the hoses top and bottom line up perfectly to the originals. The only thing you have to do is change the top hose for a 12 one, because the radiator is a little bit wider. I then made a bracket specifically for this to fit in the car, because the original one bolts through where that bottom bolt is down there, that is currently actually spawning the new bracket I made up. So this isn't the original setup, and consequently there isn't actually a shroud that fits it. So what I've actually done today is I've gone out and bought a sheet of steel, and what I'm going to do is make one up. It's going to be rather interesting, but I'm confident I can do it, so yeah. But hopefully by making a cowling which basically forces this fan to only suck through the radiator rather than anything in front of it, in theory should sort that problem out and mean that when it's idling it's not creeping up in temperature, it's cooling more efficiently and sucking the air through properly. It's only quite an interesting job really, because until you're trying to do it, you don't actually realise how difficult it actually is to try and make a cowling that goes round the fan in quite a tight fashion. It's actually quite challenging, especially when, as I'm discovering, on this one, the bottom blades of that fan actually go below the radiator itself. So what I've decided to do in that respect is just end up with sort of a piece of metal the shape of my hand right now, so it just essentially slots into the bracket where the radiator is, and purely just and just goes straight down like that around the blade, to purely just make sure that when it's creating a vacuum, it's essentially just directing the vacuum effect to the radiator itself. At the top, got exactly the same thing again, just basically bent a piece over like that, and I'll drill some holes in it, and the holes you see along here will be where it's bolted to. Early stages, but this is it coming together. So I've got this top piece here, which basically flares upwards over the top of the fan, and then it just bolts, as I was mentioning earlier, to the top edge of the radiator. And what I'm going to do tomorrow morning, when we've got some light and the ability to make some noise, I will make a couple of side pieces that will go basically from, obviously, this bottom all the way to the top. Possibly curve these corners, because obviously the radiator in the fan isn't square, it's round. So we try and round that off a little bit to close this gap up, so it's got more, essentially creates a bit more vacuum. But generally speaking, going to get a side on there, side on the other side, make it square. It will slot in the bottom, as I said earlier, bolt in the top, and then hopefully it's going to create a better vacuum. Now the only thing is, I can't actually remember how the original process of putting this all together was. Obviously I did do it once upon a time, because it did originally have the correct radiator and the right cowling on it. I've got a feeling that it was a matter of all this here was pre-assembled, and then this panel here, because it can lift out, I think the radiator was put in with this panel straight in, and then it pushes in there, so that then the fan then slots into the cowling as this panel's pushed forward. I think that's how it went. So consequently, that's sort of how I'm going to try and make my one work as well. I'm going to essentially make it so that you release these up here. The thing should then be able to lean backwards just enough that you can drop the thing between the fan and the radiator, which will then hopefully mean that it's a nice and easy installation, and obviously take it out if you need to. Here it is, our very first inclination of our cowling. Now this morning I thought to myself, let's give this a quick test with the metal fan on, and then with the small plastic fan on. Now the small plastic fan is actually from Road 12, which is where the engine originally came from, and it came with the car. So I thought, well, let's just see if it makes any difference, see if it's any better, because obviously the 12 sort of overlapped with the end of this production, and sort of the car took over. So I thought, well, plastic was probably the way forward then somehow, and the way they obviously design the blades and stuff. So I thought, let's give it a try. For a starter, it does sound, to me at least, indefinitely quieter when you're, say, driving at 60 miles an hour. You can hear the difference, not sure about if it makes it any better cooling efficiency wise, but it's definitely quieter. Now I've just made this cowling up. I had to do a few alterations as I've gone along, because I've just sort of been blagging it, to be completely honest with you. I've now got a nice sort of essentially like square around the face of the radiator, and if we do camera on here, its phone, but basically the fan sort of essentially lines up just about on this edge here quite nicely. And so far, if you put a rag on this side, it will stick straight to it, and then when you really rev it up, it really sticks onto it, which obviously means that you've got the correct vacuum effect you're looking for the proper cooling. I've just taken it for a good quick spin, and it's been good as gold. Even no matter how hard I pushed it, it hasn't gone over 80 degrees. At the minute, sitting idling for the last few minutes, it's still sitting just only above 80, so it's doing really well. So sitting idling for a few minutes, on the drive it was about 80 degrees, and it's just literally tickling just above it. So far our little homemade cowling has really made a lot of difference. I think I may well just add a little bit of cowling around edge of the fan, as if sort of like a tunnel effect, just to mean that on a hot day it's definitely got the extra bit of direction it needs. been for a test drive, and it does work very, very well indeed. The only thing I did discover was when you're sort of driving around town a little bit slower, I noticed temperature is creeping back up again, and when you stop, it sort of starts creeping up a little bit as well. So what I'm going to do is, as I said earlier, I'm going to advance this a bit further. I'm going to add some material around the edges basically of the fan itself. And I'm going to start off by doing this with actual cardboard to just simply mock it up over the top of what we've already got. Essentially all we're really going to do is shut the gap between the edge of the fan and the edge of our cowling. So I'm going to mock it up with some cardboard paper first. And then I can obviously take the whole thing out, measure it up with actual metal, and then weld some metal in place. And hopefully speaking, what we want to get in the end is a nice cowling that fits nice and tightly around the edge of our fan here, and that should give us the most efficient cooling we can get hold of.